Welcome to What Does My Therapist Really Think, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what mental health professionals face. Our guest today is Meghan Cromie, a clinician who specializes in OCD and phobias, two, I would say, of the most misunderstood corners of mental health. Lots of stereotypes on TV I can't wait to debunk together. We're getting into what OCD actually is and all the things that people get wrong about it, the surprising subtypes most people have never heard of, where fear ends and a clinical phobia begins, and what recovery really looks like. Meghan, thank you so much for being here.
So excited to get to talk with you guys. I really share your sympathies. There's so much out there about OCD and phobias that is so misunderstood, and genuinely, I do think if all of us could understand it a lot better, I think it'd be a lot more common than we think it is right now.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's like such an insidious diagnosis because I feel like even as a therapist, and like a therapist who's pretty educated on OCD, because I have loved ones with OCD. Katie, do you have any questions about OCD?
Maybe let's start from the beginning. Let's start, what is an actual phobia? And also, I guess let's also get into like, what is OCD?
I think it's very common. Everyone's got fears, right? Everyone is not going to like a certain thing. And usually things like, spiders, bugs, needles, no one really enjoys a lot of these things. However, where it becomes a phobia is where that fear becomes really extreme. Even the idea of this thing is now triggering a lot of fear response in my body. And primarily, it's actually defined by really avoidance. So how much it's impacting our lives. So I might have a discomfort with spiders. I will be honest, I certainly don't like them. I'm not going out there, I'm not touching anything. I like nature, but not that much. But someone who has a phobia of spiders will find that even the slightest hint that a spider could be around them might be enough to really not only set them off, but make them afraid to even go outside or walk into grass, so much as even to take their dog for a walk. So I would say it's more even about the scope of how it impacts you than it is about certain things being the right type of fear to be a phobia or not. Really, anything can be. It's just about having a specific fear around specific thing or situation that develops to such an extent you feel like I can't handle it, I need to get away from it, and it kind of just starts to shrink our life over time.
I've always wondered because I do feel like I have a very intense fear of tarantulas, and I feel like it came from when I was a really young kid. I had glasses, and when I would go to the optometrist, they would show me a large photo of it, like a real insect, and they would make me like grab it. And from that age, I was like, ah! So like large hairy bugs, like to the point where if someone's showing me a photo or something, it would just like, I've blacked out before. And I don't really think it really impacts my life that negatively, right? Like, I just don't like it. But I'm not, like, I don't really want to go to Australia. I don't really want to go to the jungle, but is that really negatively impacting my life? So you're saying that in that case, probably not considered like an actual phobia.
Probably maybe not to the most clinical sense of the word, or it would be on like the milder spectrum, but it's whatever we want to call it. I don't think we need to kind of gatekeep a lot of clinical language where it becomes a much more like big issue, and where sometimes it makes sense then to be seeking mental health treatment or support or medication or things like that, is definitely where it does start to impact your life, right? Where, yeah, if the only place I can't go is Australia, I'll probably be okay. But if it starts to get to that point where suddenly at the grocery store, I'm checking the banana section because what if there's a spider there? I need to be sure. I don't know if I can go outside, or I don't think I even want to go to Petco, even though my dog's food is there, because I know they have spiders and I don't even want to be that close. You can see where that line just starts to get blurred to a fear that you don't like to something that really becomes almost this daily issue for most people. To your other question, which is, what is OCD? That's another great one. OCD theoretically is pretty simple in that it is characterized by two main components, obsessions and compulsions. It is in the name. It's really just those two things. However, I think there can be so much misunderstanding about what those are. So basically what OCD is, if I had to break it down, is that people tend to experience something that we will call an intrusive thought. This can be any sort of like really scary image. It can be a physical sensation, or it can be just kind of a scary what if thought almost. But it's some sort of specific thought that kind of comes into our head that becomes sticky. It starts to feel very real, and the intensity of it makes us feel that we have to kind of do something to stop it from happening or to just make the thought go away. And so that's where we engage in something called compulsions. These can be physical, they can be mental, so they can be almost invisible, or you can see someone doing something repeatedly. It's these kind of looping acts that we're doing to try to almost like push these thoughts out. So, for example, if maybe I have an intrusive thought of some sort of harm coming to my dog, that might really terrify me. And even though logically I'm looking at my dog, she's right in front of me, she's doing okay, the image of her, potentially being badly hurt or killed is so distressing that I might need to go out and physically lock my doors just to be sure she can't get out so she couldn't be hit by a car. It oftentimes may start as just that one loop or one thing I'm doing to kind of feel safer, but OCD is kind of considered what I usually will call the doubting disorder. Is that what characterizes it from just a symbol, a single time fear or a single intrusive thought that we kind of have and get over, is the fact that it becomes incredibly sticky. So once I've done that, and I've now checked my locks to make sure that the door is actually closed so she's not going to get out, the doubt doesn't stop there. In fact, the thought might actually reappear even after the locks are checked, because I've given that thought so much attention, right? And I've kind of acted on it in this way. Now my brain is actually starting to perceive it as a much more real threat. So I may notice now I feel like I have to go check again, because what if I know I did it, but just what if I didn't, and that may repeat.
So that makes sense then that those two, phobias and OCD, are actually, I guess they are more closely related than I would have thought, because it is an intrusive, scary thought that hinders you from living a productive life.
They are fairly similar. They both follow very similar kind of avoidance / safety behavior compulsion styles of seeking relief by trying to kind of get away from it. I would describe OCD as almost like having a phobia, but it's like you usually have 20.
Right.
So it's because you have so many, and most people experience many different themes of intrusive thoughts or patterns of it. So it's very rare someone has a single loop that they find the need to do, but oftentimes many. So they do very much look very similar and can lead to some similar looking behaviors. OCD is almost different in that it's more expansive. I might have many different fears about many different things that are all causing these different loops in different areas of my life. But yeah, definitely pretty similar, and they're also treated very similarly.
I guess I'm curious, what do you find fulfilling about this kind of work?
I mean, I can be honest, I didn't go out of grad school kind of being like, I want to be an OCD and phobia specialist. I did kind of fall into it. My own personal struggle, mental health wise, was much more in the realm of really intense social anxiety and panic disorder. And so I would be so anxious about, getting panicked and being perceived as awkward that I basically became agoraphobic / close to housebound. I would only feel like I can leave the house with my sister or a family member. I would just feel so awkward about being anywhere that wasn't work, home, or school. And I would kind of avoid going anywhere besides those spots. And so as part of my own recovery, I really had to do kind of my own self-guided exposure to face those fears, get out of my comfort zone to get better. So that was just something I had been doing, and kind of one of my early specialties after I graduated school. And I was working with it, helping lots of different people. But something I noticed was that it was pretty much right after COVID had the restrictions for COVID were ending. As someone who was, kind of known in the area for treating agoraphobia, so that fear of kind of leaving the house, I had a lot of people who started coming to me. And unlike a lot of the clients I had been seeing up till that point, the thing that was driving their fear was actually OCD instead of kind of social anxiety or panic. So I started seeing a lot of clients who were terrified of leaving the house after COVID because they were so worried they were going to get sick or contaminated or that something was going to happen. And they had gotten used to total avoidance So, basically a lot of compulsions during lockdown that became so normalized. And so I basically kind of took that and went, hey, it's a different fear, right? It is different, but this is so similar to what I actually experienced and my own journey with it. And so I found there were so many similarities to the same way we had to face those scary thoughts, to the same way we had to, not avoid things and really get out of that comfort zone and not engage in kind of these mental and physical behaviors that help keep you safe. But I kind of realized, I'm like, wow, there's a huge lack of specialists in this area. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of understanding. And so that was something I also started doing, especially as I was seeing more OCD cases and that were far beyond contamination, was I was realizing like a lot of people were getting misdiagnosed. They weren't getting the treatment they needed. And there were just so many more people who had these symptoms and needed help than there were people trained to be able to provide it. So I would say that's also kind of a big secondary reason why I continued to pursue as much the training and specialty as I did. But yeah, I kind of fell into it, honestly, by accident, just coming into it being like, yeah, I treat these other anxiety disorders and fears and phobias. And then OCD kind of walked in my door and I was like, wow, this is different in its own way, but also it feels so similar to what I had gone through. And I had also struggled with intrusive thoughts of my own. Granted, on the milder end, so I wouldn't say OCD was my biggest kind of part of my journey, but it was something I related to really heavily, where I was like, I've also had these types of thoughts and questions and this urge to kind of stay up thinking about it. So it was really easy to kind of relate to that and work with people who wanted to overcome it.
I feel like we're talking about really prolific forms of OCD right now, but it also makes me wonder about a form I see a lot, but can be a little bit harder to treat, which is pure O. And how does pure O OCD differ from some of the things we're talking about here?
Pure O, basically it's what we call just a form of OCD that is primarily mental compulsions. I will say I have yet to come across someone who was truly 100% mental and did zero physical compulsions of any sort. But when we are looking at the mental loops, it is the same in most of the ways. Like it's the same form of OCD. It doesn't change how the cycle works. It doesn't really change how treatment works. But I will say it's easier to miss because so many people, when we think of OCD, we think of physical compulsions. We think of checking and cleaning and wiping and doing these acts versus with pure O and with most forms of OCD, because actually almost every single OCD theme also incorporates mental compulsions. So it's not exclusive to pure O. This is something that pretty much everyone with OCD is going to have at some point, is that they're doing mental loops. Now, these mental compulsions usually involve things like maybe replaying memories to be more certain of what happened. It might involve reassuring ourselves that no, that can't happen. No, those thoughts aren't actually true. That's not the type of person I am. It might look like debating the thoughts kind of endlessly in this almost like rumination logic loop where we're going back and forth with them over and over again. It looks like sometimes taking mental pictures of things to go back to, going through every piece of information we've ever known to see, does it support this thought or does it make me feel better? So all of these things, these mental acts are our attempt, right, to kind of push the thoughts away, to make them kind of resolve through becoming more certain about something. So I would say with pure O, the hard part about that is, of course, that so many of these acts are invisible. One, you can hide them from people. So, your partner's not maybe going to know and be like, you're OCDing right now, right? They can be invisible. And a lot of times they're misunderstood as just general rumination, because of course, anyone can kind of loop on something for a while, right? Like I might be just really thinking about one topic in a few different ways, but the actual, like the stickiness of those thoughts and kind of that cycle where I do have this thought or this image or this sensation that I find I need to mentally inspect or push away. And then, the thought comes back, right? The sensation's right there again. So it follows the exact same pattern. It's not treated any differently than traditional OCD is, but I would say it's much harder for people to sometimes get diagnosed because, just someone who may not have that exact training in OCD and isn't looking for it is going to view that as just general anxiety disorder. They're not going to maybe catch that, yes, I'm worrying about something, but look at this kind of mental loop I'm trapped in. And the fact that a lot of times the intrusive thoughts themselves, they're not even really bound by logic per se, which is a lot of times someone who's got pure OCD, they sometimes know these questions cannot be answered, that they know, when I'm not obsessing about it, I'm not so worried about my faith or my sexuality or all of these kind of intrusive thoughts and themes that we can get stuck on. But when the thought shows up, suddenly that knowledge, that certainty is out the window, and I'm kind of consumed by what I would call is the feeling of doubt, which is not always logical. It's almost separate, that my logic's here, but the feeling of doubt is almost over here, and they don't always connect. So I can logically know something's very unlikely or untrue, but because there's a feeling that it's possible, it almost becomes all-consuming, and that's what's motivating me to continue to kind of mentally dig deeper and deeper, and it creates essentially the spiral type presentation that we'll usually see with OCD.
Meghan, I'm curious, since you shared that you had your own struggles with certain phobias, and I'm wondering, when you do this work, is it ever triggering for you to maybe find someone who struggled with something that you struggled with in the past? Because I would imagine hearing someone talk about their phobias and things that could happen, I know for me personally, I might in the back of my head be like, yeah, maybe that could happen. Maybe that would be, I don't know if it would spew up new things to be scared of for me, but I also am very susceptible to people's ideas and thoughts. So I don't know, is that a concern of yours? Have you experienced that, or?
To be honest, at this point, not too much. Part of that is, I have worked through a lot of those phobias so much, and so that ability to actually kind of separate myself from it, even on harder days, I think I have just strengthened that through the years so that it's a lot easier. And in fact, I actually find, I will work with any client, right, that we're doing good work together, but I actually find it kind of strengthens that therapeutic rapport and relationship and makes it usually even easier to kind of jump in. So when they know oh, hey, you've had these types of thoughts before, or they are able to recognize, oh yeah, what a panic attack's going to feel like. What it feels like to be preoccupied with these types of thoughts and images of what's going to happen when you leave the house. I find it actually becomes a little easier to actually do that very difficult work. That's not to say I never get triggered during therapy sessions. I still do. But nowadays I'll find it's more on whatever my issue of the week happens to be. So I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect. If I just had a fight with my partner and someone brings that up, sometimes I do have to redirect myself a little bit to be we're not thinking about that. We're not going there. Let's stay here. But luckily at this point, phobia-wise, it's not too much of something that actually consistently pops up. And in fact, now it kind of can actually help, I think, that therapeutic journey and rapport a little bit more to just, be working with someone has really gone through something pretty similar.
I think we talk, Andy, I know we talk about, certain fields of work where clients would love to know that they're feeling like they're working with someone who knows what they're going through, and then some where they don't.
Meghan, we love to talk about the, if you have a eating disorder, you don't want a provider with an eating disorder, or if you're getting divorced, you don't want a provider who's been divorced. But if you have substance use, you do want somebody who knows what substance use is like. Yep. And sort of this dichotomy of what pulls you in versus pushes you away depending on what you've got going on, which is just fascinating and very inconsistent. So that's what Katie's referencing.
Yeah. Love that weird rule. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember in grad school, I was at a substance use facility for one of my internships or practicum, something like that. And they were we don't want to work with them if they're not substance users. And our supervisor had to convince them. She's like, well, they never even developed substance use. Don't you want to know what that's like? And they were like, no,
no,
our brains are different. Absolutely Get us away from these 24-year-olds.
And let me tell you right now, if I ever get married and I have to go to marriage counseling, I would love a divorce marriage therapist. I really would, because they know when it's time to go, and they know how hard it is to get through it. I'm just saying. I think people go through things, have a lot to say and a lot to teach about this stuff.
I agree.
But yeah.
But I do think OCD is one of those where people feel more seen when it's somebody who has experienced OCD themselves, or even like, I feel like now I've never gone for my own diagnosis. A funny story about this, but I feel like I have an obsessive personality. So even if I, don't meet criteria for full OCD or something in that realm, I am very clearly like an obsessive person. Unfortunately, anybody that's talked to me for 5 minutes probably could figure it out. But I think even when I have patients with like true classical or just pure OCD, it's like a little atypical. I get it enough, to where they feel seen. I think it can be difficult when someone hasn't felt drug around by their thoughts in that way to spot OCD in the first place and to treat it. Not to say they wouldn't be incredible providers with the right training or just in general, but how do you feel about that yourself, Meghan, as somebody who has struggled with anxiety disorders, has sought treatment for them, and is a provider on the other end?
I think it can be so mixed and so dependent on each person. I think there's really nothing wrong. In fact, it can often be the source of strength when you're working with someone who's kind of been through a bit of what you've gone through with OCD, just in like helping to kind of normalize, especially just these thoughts. Because I think while technically, of course, everyone experiences intrusive thoughts, we really don't like to talk about them. And so, just being able to even connect with another human being who's willing to say, like, I've had these types of icky thoughts before too, and it is normal. And I've experienced the other part, which is the struggle with it and that desire, like that just human nature desire to try to relieve it, to try to get rid of it, to try to fight it. I think it generally helps. I will say I try to balance it because, and you've probably seen sometimes when you're working with someone who's brand new with OCD, what they are actually after is a lot of reassurance. And so
yes,
they're asking those
especially with like
questions.
Moral OCD or my pure OCD people. Yeah, 100%, Meghan. Sorry, keep going.
No, you're fine. Yeah. So I have to be very careful. I think as a therapist, that's kind of my line. I'm always balancing, especially early on, which is I'm happy to disclose a little bit because I do want you to feel like I can kind of get it and that I understand and that I'm here for you. But it can very easily blur the line into the realm of actually reassurance seeking. And so, I do try to set those limits with my clients. So there might be certain things, like I will share some generalities about maybe like the types of intrusive thoughts I've experienced, but I won't go into detail discussing them. And, I find it important to remind people that I'm here, I'll normalize it. But ultimately that me sharing this is really only going to very temporarily relieve some doubt, and then you're going to feel this way again in 10 minutes. And I may not be here, so it's on you at the end of session. It's natural. I'm not shaming them for wanting that reassurance because, again, that's part of working with OCD. But I do find I have to be very mindful of how and when I share it, as I would a lot of things, even diagnosis, right? Like you want to share, and it's important information for someone to know they have OCD, but even that, when it gets asked the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th time, can become part of that reassurance loop. And so I have to, always help them be aware of that it's never to shut you down. It's never because I don't care. It's not because you don't deserve the information. But that my goal is to help guide you towards healing, which is not about hearing that it's okay for the 10,000th time, because you can hear that from your family, your friends. Everyone will tell you, oh no, it's actually okay. You're okay. And it's never once stopped OCD for anyone. The bulk of what actually makes things better is just someone who's willing to sit by you there, encourage you to kind of push through, and who's not going to just feed you reassurance and help you ruminate about your issues over and over again. If you can't find a therapist near you who didn't personally have OCD, it's not like you're not going to recover. You will. I know it can help make things feel a little easier at first, though, which I think, of course, is naturally still very important.
Getting into our treatment a little bit. So the primary treatment for OCD is, acronym of the day, ERP. But could you tell us a little bit about ERP and then sort of the other approaches or modalities that you bring into the counseling room?
The gold standard treatment for OCD is ERP. That stands for Exposure Response Prevention. Fancy words. Basically, what that entails is we are finding some way to expose you to intrusive thoughts, aka just prompting some thoughts to pop up. And then we are doing response prevention, fancy way to say, we are going to not do those compulsions. We're going to try our best at least. So it's just those two things. A lot of OCD stuff, very simple in theory, extremely hard to do. And so that's the really hard part about ERP is that it's simple, but it's incredibly challenging. And so typically what that entails is we are going to come up with and brainstorm ideas for exposures together and create a hierarchy or a fear ladder, which is basically like a little stepwise plan of how you would actually face those fears and just really practice the core component of recovery, which is the response prevention. It's learning how to tolerate uncomfortable sensations. It's learning how to tolerate the feeling of discomfort and uncertainty and resisting fixing it. And so that's what ERP is really about, is about slowly building that muscle up until you can tolerate it and accept a lot more uncertainty and, not knowing what these questions mean or what these thoughts mean or what is the sensation in my body, being okay with that. And that is actually what causes people to really recover. So to get to a point where these thoughts and feelings don't bug me anymore. And that's when they go away. Only then. It's usually the first thing people ask is, how can I get these thoughts out of my head, Megan? I'm dying. Get them out right now. And the unfortunate answer is that is the last part of treatment, is eventually we will get them out of here, but not even on purpose, really. We're directly doing all these other things, and naturally they will stop popping in. But that's what the core of the treatment is. So it's really about changing our relationship to uncertainty and doubt and thoughts, and really learning how to tolerate the uncomfortable emotions that come with it in a slow, progressive, and extremely behavioral way. So we're not talking about it, we're doing it. We're doing it together, and we're doing it over and over and over again.
I think you explained that so well. And I feel like a lot of ERP, and I say this about other therapies too, I say this about EMDR a lot, is it's also exposure to your own mind, and it's trust building with yourself. Like if you learn that you can do hard things, if you learn that you're going to be okay just being you, if you learn that it's okay to exist in your mind, and this comes with like this incredibly directive therapy, but I think they all kind of work together towards the same goal. So walking through, I've done exposure hierarchies with my clients, but I oftentimes find them difficult to explain. You did such a great job, but I would even love an example. So let's say I know somebody who might have a phobia of tarantulas. What would be their sort of like level one
Oh,
step?
God. Okay. Yeah.
And how would they go up?
Katie, you're getting a little exposure therapy right here, as I think part of being the co-host, maybe.
Oh, my God. No, I've always been curious about this. It's funny. I went on a date with a guy once that was from Australia, and I was like, well, I don't think this ever work out, so I'll never go there. And he said, you're afraid of spiders? How about guns? And I was like, that's fair. So fair. But no, I would love to know, because I would love to go to Australia one day. So let's talk about how we can get there. Okay, great.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the great ways we might start a hierarchy is actually to take someone's biggest fear or ultimate goal when it comes to OCD or their phobia and put that at the top. So if we were to use you for an example, maybe we'd use something like being able to go to Australia or some other place where big spiders live and not check for spiders, not avoid doing anything because a spider might be there. So that might be like the number one biggest goal. And then we either tend to scaffold down, or you can take the opposite approach, which is to start with the smallest step and eventually kind of work up. Obviously, they both get to the same place. But essentially, you would kind of work through with the person what would be those steps that would actually help you kind of build that confidence, right? Like if that's your ultimate goal, what would you feel like you would need to be able to do to get there? And I will say this depends so much on the person. It's why getting this kind of treatment can be hard, is because there's not one set exposure hierarchy I can just Google and follow, and that's going to be my guide. I have to make it based on my own triggers, my own fear intensity level. Katie, if we were to use you as an example, let's say even the word tarantula.
And it does. Right? And it does. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So that might be an example of maybe where we would start. Now, for that person, maybe even thinking it, not even saying it out loud, might be their first step. But for someone else, they can just say it, right? And it becomes that piece of like, hey, we would say it, and we would say it over and over and over and over again until, weirdly enough, if you say any word out loud enough, it like kind of stops feeling real and just feels silly. That's kind of what happens ad nauseum for every exposure. So let's say we'd start there, even just saying the word tarantula. Once that feels easier, maybe it would be something like bringing an image of a spider to our mind, right? And we'd kind of select it. So maybe we'd be like, imagine a small spider, imagine a cartoon spider in your mind, right? That feels a little easier, but okay, can we make it a little bit of a bigger spider? We might then do something like viewing images, and we'll break it up. Usually we split it into, like, for arachnophobia specifically, we'll split it into a small, a medium, and the worst is large hairy spiders where I can see the hair and the eyes and the legs and all the nasty parts, right? So usually we'll kind of work up, starting with smaller spiders. And the fun part of being an exposure therapist is you've got stacks of files on your computer of the weirdest stuff. So I've got so many great photos of cute little spiders that kind of look like they're smiling, and they're great first exposures for people getting into arachnophobia treatment. And we work up into, of course, spiders that feel a little more intense. Then we might do videos. So that might be like videos of spiders from afar, then moving on to like closer up, or spiders running, because like seeing the legs move is usually right? Then we might move on to like some of those fear factor videos, right? Like the nasty ones where it's like, oh my God, there's 10 spiders on someone. I can't look at this. And again, same idea, where we're just rewatching it until it may always feel a little gross, but it doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel like something I kind of have to not look at to be okay. And we usually want to include something we'll call in vivo exposures. These are going to be real life exposures, so things that put you around spiders. So some ones I've done would be things that start simple, like maybe even just like I'm going to like walk outside of my apartment complex and walk in the grass, short mowed grass, but still like there could be a spider there, but I'm not going to avoid it. And then we might work up to like, I'm going to go to the park and like sit in the long grass. Maybe there's a spider, maybe there isn't. Working up to like, let's go for a walk. And when you see a spider on the trail, because you probably will, maybe we just start looking at it. And then eventually work towards getting closer to it until it's like, maybe I'm here and the spider's there in the bush. And then eventually we'll usually work up towards bigger things. So that might be even things like, which again, the more you do exposure therapy, your life gets so weird. They sell like taxidermy tarantulas on Etsy. That's what I found out from working with arachnophobia long enough. So we might even do something like that. Yeah, like buy it online and they just like look at it for a week until they can get closer, until they can actually kind of like touch it. And then we usually might even go all the way to the point of going to the pet store, being around the spiders, and eventually work up towards handling them. So,
yeah,
everyone is allowed
Meghan,
to
getting
stop
that
at the right
package.
point. Yeah,
getting that package in the mail.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
No, I mean, it makes sense though. It does make a lot of sense because it is like, I'll tell you one time, I do think mine is a little more intense than the average bear. When I was in San Francisco, they had a tarantula exhibit, and the streets of 19th Avenue were these huge banners with these big tarantulas, and like bus would come with like a big bus ad with a big tarantula on. And I feel like if they talked to you, Meghan, they would say, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. But I like almost like, I was like, ugh, and I like literally almost would crash my car. I hated you explaining that whole thing.
I saw, I know it'll be audio only, but yeah, I saw you recoiling back in your seat as I kept going farther up the hierarchy to like, oh no. And that is actually the exact reaction I would look for in a client, because I do one of the big, I guess, sayings, phrases, whatever, that we'll often use with exposure therapy. If it doesn't bug you, if it doesn't scare you, if it doesn't give you that ick, we probably don't need to do it. So if it feels, I kind of almost want to be sick thinking about it, to us, that's always a great guide that I'm like, perfect. Then it does need to be on your exposure hierarchy, but you tell me where. 0 to 10 or 0 to 100, you tell me where, but it's probably got to be on this list if it bothers you that much.
Yeah. I think if it worked out with an Australian, I'd probably give you a call. Yeah, the taxidermy tarantula really freaked me out. But I get it. It's really great work.
Yeah, I know. So maybe we should have picked a different phobia just for.
I'm sorry, I'm triggered. Okay,
You're
but
good,
you know what?
you're
I am curious. What else is on your desktop? Like, what other kind of phobias are there out there that? And I'm curious if there's any that are like popping up more than before. If there's like anything that like is you're finding, like, I'm sure after the pandemic, you know, I'm like, people being outside is a huge. I think I saw that just in so many people I knew. But I'm curious, like, is there anything that's really common? Is there anything that's like interesting? I'm just curious. Yeah, what's on your desktop?
You wouldn't want to see it. My partner hates looking at any of the pictures I have for exposures. But one other one that actually is one of my main phobia specialties and is actually a lot more common than a lot of people think is something called emetophobia, which is the fear of vomiting. And
oh, yes.
you know, a lot of people experience this to some extent because, of course, like many phobias, they're all a little, right? But that's a common one I really treat that I think a lot of people don't realize not only how common it is, but how debilitating it can get.
Yeah.
So many people, of course, may not like to see photos or videos or hear people who are actively getting sick, but the phobia can be so severe that it actually basically mirrors an eating disorder where the person's world of what is safe and is not going to make me nauseous and is not going to make me sick and is not going to make me have any uncomfortable body sensations becomes smaller and smaller until I worked with, one girl, when she first started, she was only able to drink room temperature water and eat deli meat and very finely sliced little pieces of cheese. And that's what she had been eating for almost 2 years straight because anything else, there was a fear it was either going to get caught in her throat and then cause her to vomit or be sick, or that it would induce some sort of nausea that would make her sick. So she would just eat these small portions, not even a full meal of, diced up meat and cheese, but tiny little portions like a mouse throughout the day to avoid any feelings of being overfull or nausea that can come up. So that's a big phobia that I treat that is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily more common than fear of flying or spiders or things like that, but usually needs much more specialized help and substantial treatment compared to what we would consider a simple phobia. Not that it's easier, it's just not these layers of complexity of like how much it kind of can impact your day-to-day. But like fear of heights versus something like emetophobia, there can be just differences. A lot of people are actually able to overcome their phobias on their own without necessarily needing specialty treatment per se for a simple phobia, because there are actually, it's kind of almost common sense, even though it's incredibly hard and uncomfortable. So for example, we'll see things like Toastmasters, right? If you have a fear of public speaking, there's a whole system set up to kind of help you face that, right? So definitely, I would say emetophobia is probably one of the ones that when I first started specializing in phobias, I was the most surprised by, that it was so bad, so to speak, right? Where I was like, oh, fear of vomiting. Well, how often does that happen? Maybe you don't like what? You don't like going on trains or like an airplane? No, it's huge. So I have so many clips of people vomiting, people being sick. My video collection on YouTube is constantly evolving. And also, I have to keep at it because I keep getting stricken from YouTube for obvious reasons. So that's one of the hardest parts of being an exposure therapist is you are constantly having to find new images and new videos because the internet keeps taking them from me. Because people are reporting them for being gross and nasty. And I'm like, yeah, but I need them.
I need them.
I need
Megan, if you need help, I can tell you how to download those videos. I'm going to rip those videos if you'd like. As long as it's not I'll just tell you how. Yep. I don't have to see them. Yes, great.
We'll have to have you come back and do subtypes. I think they could almost each be an episode too, like POCD I see all the time, which is pedophilic OCD, harm OCD all the time. But anyway, we would love to have you back, which also means it's hot takes time.
Okay.
It's hot takes time.
I would say one of my biggest hot takes, which it comes across as a hot take both in session with clients as well as to other therapists, is I think for OCD, but also for a lot of anxiety-based conditions, insight is incredibly overrated. I think we harp on insight in therapy and the idea of therapy and like sitting on a couch and analyzing, here's what happened in my childhood, I think we overinflate its importance. Not that it has no place, it certainly does. I think it can be really useful to understand why we do the things we do and why maybe we might have certain fears and where they might originate from. But I think so much of the time we really don't put enough emphasis on just kind of the behavioral component of having to get out of your comfort zone and do it so consistently. And I think that really applies to OCD, where the treatment for it is so behavioral, and yet the temptation is always to ask the why and to understand where did this obsession come from, and how did I get this, and what does it look like, and how did that tie in, that it completely blocks people from ever recovering. But I think it applies to a lot of phobias and just general anxiety pieces, that it's actually easier. It feels more relieving to gain continued insight than it does to actually start changing that behavioral pattern and learning how to process and sit with discomfort. And I think that is a problem across the therapy spectrum. It's both from therapists, because I think it can be also easy for us and feels relieving to help clients get that insight, but also on like the general side that, I think it's a common misunderstanding of the purpose of therapy, that it's only about kind of intellectually getting to these points of understanding. And I think it has left a lot of people stuck. So I would say that's my biggest hot take. It's very specifically, like for OCD, it's the most important, because you will definitely never out-ruminate your way from OCD. Never. No one's ever done it, believe me. It's not a problem-solving issue. If it was, no one would have it. But I do think it applies to a lot of mental health treatment at large.
That was a good one. I think very topical one. I think a lot of people are at a place where they're getting stuck, frustrated, don't understand why the change they're expecting isn't happening. And if this is, your phenotype, like the way your challenges are presenting, I think it's a really good pivot and just, reminder to providers. I think anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to get trained in ERP, even if you don't want it to be your thing all the way, totally fine. Take that free CEU. I think it's absolutely worth learning. And I know in several of my specialties throughout the years, it's come up in different ways. I think it's just a critical part of what we do, on top of all of the other wonderful things. But Megan, thank you so much for your time. Katie, thank you for facing your fears with us and not bringing in my fear of snakes a single time. You're a real hero.
I'm going to get you a taxidermy snake, Andy.
I will throw
it in the mail.
I got Katie a little snake for her birthday, because she had snakes she brought real live snakes out at her live show and tried to hand it to me. And
I didn't know, in my defense, I had no idea, because I would never do that to someone who, because I always tell everyone, I know you're tempted to send me a picture of a tarantula, don't do it, because I'll have to buy a new phone. So I'm so sorry that I did that to you.
You're like, no you're idea. From Florida, you must be used to this. But
you must be.
Actually traumatized. Yeah. Anyway, I appreciate you facing your fears and not make me do it. That's always so nice and appreciated. And Megan, you're so lovely. You're such a great person to have on this podcast. You speak so eloquently to all of these issues. We'd love to have you back. And now I think it's time to cue our wonderful musical artist, Kenny.
Cue Kenny.
Cue Kenny.
What Does Your Therapist Really Think is a Dre Media production. Theme song by Kenny Gray. If you want to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all the socials, go ahead and do it at Drea Vita. Have a question for a future episode? Go ahead and send us a DM. Start your mental health journey today and head to dreavita.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and send someone this podcast. They might like it. We'll see you next time.